You have probably done this before. You get a raise. You tell yourself this is the one that changes things. A few months later, the money is gone and nothing feels different. Or you read the book. You understand the concepts. You know what you should be doing, and still nothing moves. That gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it is not a discipline problem. It is not a motivation problem. It is a psychology problem, and it has a very specific structure. The middle class is not a tax bracket. It is a psychological pattern, a set of invisible traps that feel completely normal, completely rational, and completely safe until you name them and realize they have been running your financial life without your permission. In this video, we are going to map 7 of those traps, not the obvious ones. Not spend less, save more. You have heard that. It did not move anything. These are the structural patterns that operate below conscious awareness, the ones that survive even when you know about them, because knowing a trap exists and being free of it are 2 completely different things. We will go through each one, where it comes from, how it operates, and what it actually takes to break it. By the end of this, you will not see your financial behavior the same way. That is not a promise of comfort. It is a warning. Trap 1, the arrival fallacy. Here is how it works. You tell yourself, when I get the raise, I will start investing. When I pay off the car, I will build the emergency fund. When I finally earn enough, then I will take money seriously. That moment is always 6 months away. Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert spent years studying what he called affective forecasting, the way humans predict their own future emotional states. His conclusion: we are systematically wrong. We believe the next financial milestone will change how we feel. It will not, because the behavior that created the current situation travels with you to the next income level. Studies tracking lottery winners showed that within 2 years, most returned to roughly the same level of financial stress they experienced before winning. Not because of bad luck, because the psychological patterns were still intact. The arrival fallacy is not laziness. It is a cognitive defense mechanism. The brain uses future conditions as permission to delay present discomfort. The trap is not the waiting. The trap is believing the waiting is rational. Wealth does not begin at a number. It begins at a decision that has nothing to do with the number. And trap 2 is why even people who know this still cannot stop spending. Trap 2, status spending. Picture this: 2 colleagues, same company, same salary, same city. One lives in a modest apartment, cooks most nights, drives a used car. The other has a new lease, eats out constantly, upgrades the phone every year. 5 years later, one of them has options. The other has a lifestyle. In 2016, researchers at the University of Chicago studied visible consumption patterns across income brackets. The finding was counterintuitive. Middle-income households spent a disproportionately higher percentage of their income on visible goods compared to high-net-worth individuals in the same geographic areas. The wealthy were less visible, not more. This is not coincidence. It is strategy. Psychologist Robert Cialdini identified social proof as one of the 6 core mechanisms of human influence. We look to those around us to determine what is normal, what is acceptable, what is expected. In a culture where the visible markers of success are lifestyle upgrades and new purchases, the middle class spends to signal membership in a group it has not yet joined. Every dollar spent performing wealth is a dollar not building it. One is free, the other is performing. But here is what makes trap 3 darker than both of these. It does not matter how disciplined you are, because this one operates before discipline even has a chance. Trap 3, the cognitive bandwidth tax. In 2013, behavioral economist Senthil Mullainathan published research that changed how scientists understood financial decision-making. His finding: scarcity does not just create stress, it consumes cognitive bandwidth. When the mind is preoccupied with financial pressure, a bill coming due, an account running low, a decision that cannot be delayed, it operates with measurably less capacity for everything else. Mullainathan's studies showed the equivalent of a 13-point reduction in IQ performance during periods of financial stress. 13 points. 13 points. Not from a health crisis, not from sleep deprivation, from the cognitive load of managing financial scarcity. Think about the last time you were genuinely stressed about money, not worried, stressed. The kind where you wake up at 3 in the morning running numbers that do not add up. Now think about the quality of decisions you made that week. That is not coincidence. That is the bandwidth tax being collected. Financial stress consumes bandwidth. Reduced bandwidth produces worse decisions. Worse decisions deepen financial stress. This is not a character flaw. It is a documented cognitive mechanism. The question is not, why do I keep making the same mistakes? The question is, what would reduce the cognitive load enough to make better decisions possible? That is a solvable problem. The first version is not. Now, Trap 4 explains why even people without financial stress still cannot save. Trap 4, present bias. Behavioral economists Richard Thaler and Shlomo Benartzi ran a series of experiments testing how people weigh immediate rewards against future ones. The findings confirmed what decades of research had already suggested. The human brain does not treat time linearly when it comes to rewards. $100 today feels dramatically more valuable than $110 in 3 months, even when the math clearly favors waiting. Neuroscience explains why. The limbic system, the ancient, emotional part of the brain, activates strongly for immediate rewards. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for long-term planning, has to override that activation. It can, but it requires effort, and effort is finite. Present bias explains why the middle class is chronically undersaved. It is not that people do not value their future selves. It is that the future self feels less real than the present moment. Thaler and Benartzi designed a solution called Save More Tomorrow. Instead of asking people to save more now, which triggers present bias, they asked people to commit to saving a portion of future raises. Enrollment was nearly 90%. The behavior changed not because motivation increased, but because the system stopped competing with the bias. The trap is not weak willpower. The trap is designing a financial life that requires willpower to function. And Trap 5 is what keeps intelligent people paralyzed even after they understand all of this. Trap 5, complexity paralysis. In 2004, Columbia University researcher Sheena Iyengar published what became known as the jam study. Shoppers presented with 24 varieties of jam were far less likely to purchase than those presented with 6. More options, fewer decisions. The same mechanism operates in personal finance. You open a brokerage account, you see hundreds of options. ETFs, individual stocks, bonds, target date funds, REITs. Every financial forum tells you a different strategy. Every expert contradicts the last one, so you close the tab. You tell yourself you need to research more before you act. Complexity paralysis keeps educated, capable people financially stagnant. Not because they are uninformed, because they are waiting to be fully informed before acting. That moment never arrives. Research consistently shows that simple, consistent financial behavior, automated saving, low-cost index funds, debt elimination in order, outperforms sophisticated strategies executed inconsistently. The complexity is not protecting you. It is keeping you still. The wealthiest portfolios are often the simplest ones, not because simplicity is unsophisticated, because simplicity can actually be executed. Trap 6 is the one people resist hearing most, because it implicates something they are not ready to look at. Trap 6, the identity anchor. Psychologist Claude Steele's research on self-concept showed that humans make financial decisions consistent with how they see themselves, not necessarily with what is rational. Here is what that looks like in practice. Someone gets a significant raise. The logical move is to increase savings and keep expenses flat. Instead, within 6 months, they have a new apartment, a new car payment, and a new wardrobe. The income went up. The gap between income and expenses stayed exactly the same. This is not lifestyle inflation as a concept. This is the identity defending itself. If your sense of self is anchored to a certain level of consumption, any decision that threatens that level feels existentially dangerous. Not inconvenient, dangerous. The identity anchor explains something that income-focused financial advice cannot. Why professionals with graduate degrees and strong salaries sometimes have net worths lower than tradespeople with a fraction of the formal education. The professional's identity requires visible markers. The tradesperson's may not. Wealth requires a gap between what you earn and what you spend. The identity anchor closes that gap before it can become anything. If your sense of self depends on a certain level of visible consumption, you will fund the identity before the future. Every time. The final trap is the most invisible because it does not feel like a trap at all. It feels like reality. Trap 7. The benchmark trap. Research by economist Richard Easterlin documented what became known as the Easterlin paradox. As average income rises in a society, average happiness does not, because humans do not measure wealth in absolute terms. They measure it relative to those around them. Your financial reference group, the people you compare yourself to, determines your satisfaction far more than your actual net worth. Think about this. Someone earning $40,000 in a community where the average is 30 feels financially comfortable. The same person earning $70,000 in a community where the average is 100 feels financially behind. Same math, completely different psychological reality. The middle class benchmarks against other middle class households, which means the goal is never financial independence. The goal is keeping up, and keeping up is a moving target that can never be reached. Here is what these 7 traps have in common. None of them are about money. The arrival fallacy is about time perception. Status spending is about social signaling. The bandwidth tax is about cognitive load. Present bias is about how the brain weighs rewards. Complexity paralysis is about decision architecture. The identity anchor is about self-concept. The benchmark trap is about reference frames. Solving a money problem by adding more money into a system running these patterns is like pouring water into a bucket with 7 holes. The holes do not care about the volume. This is what behavioral economics has been documenting for 50 years, and what the standard financial advice industry has largely ignored. Because changing the pattern is harder to sell than changing the number. Your financial situation is not a reflection of your effort. It is a reflection of which of these 7 patterns are still running unchecked. That is not an excuse. It is a diagnosis, and a diagnosis is the only thing that makes a real change possible. You are not middle class because you do not earn enough. You are middle class because these 7 mechanisms have been directing your financial decisions in the background, and nobody named them for you until now. Here is the question I want you to sit with. Which of these 7 traps do you recognize most in yourself? Write it in the comments. One word is enough, because naming it is the first thing that has to happen before anything else can.